Wow. They all do it now, I guess.
Yep, it even asked me. I said, okay.
Really?
Hmm.
Interesting. Well, hi. Seems so weird to have you on my podcast. This is going to be my premiere episode of Jenni Jenni, Who Can I Turn To, with a guest and with video. I think it's going to be a heartfelt conversation with a very special guest, my daughter, Corey Campos now. Uh,
Hmm.
what I'd like to do and what I'm going to strive to do with my podcast is interview people just about the everyday miracles in their lives and how God has transformed their life in general. And for me, I know we talked about it very briefly before we started, but I have been shown all the ways in which God has um, protected me throughout my whole life. But the most amazing miracle God did, He did through me, which was you. And we're going to dive into a little bit of that history, which we've never done, um, even in community groups or uh, with people close to me. You've got to be really close to know the whole story, really close. And this is me not being afraid of the story anymore. And and I think a lot of that really came one, God calling me into deeper waters. I think what transpired at lunch with Uncle Dave and Aunt Mandy also helped me to be like, there's nothing I got to hold back anymore,
Hmm.
you know? And so, what I'd like to do as we kind of go over um, navigating life's hardest decision and hearing God's voice throughout our journey is just sort of ask you some questions. And I know for me, in my faith journey, we came to faith differently, uh, thankfully. But the real miracle started back before I even believed in God. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I just had kind of decided that my life was so painful that there couldn't have been a God. And I was just making so many reckless decisions. I didn't really want to answer to a God.
Right. Because it was easier not to.
It was a lot easier not to. Growing up, it was just going to him for not for forgiveness, for try to like get me out of trouble. Like,
Hmm.
he was sort of like the genie of, get me out of trouble, please. I'll be good if you
Hmm.
do this. And he usually did, but it just at that time I was uh, deeply into drugs and I had, oh, this is going to be rough. And I had no conception of my value, none. And so I was trying to find value in boys and men. And I did a lot of sharing. And I just didn't care. I
Hmm.
just didn't care. And I was looking for male attention and I was running the roads and sadly I had had a few abortions. And by the time I had gotten pregnant with you, I didn't want to have another abortion, but I also did not want to, and I wasn't going to, and I didn't change my life. I didn't. I
Hmm.
had no regard. I think I thought at that point that I was kind of untouchable and that I was going to work the system. And I did until I didn't. Um, and you were born addicted, and I manipulated the system to let you take me home, let me take you home. And eventually, that all caught up to me, and I ended up going to jail and looking at 50 years in prison. And it really wasn't, I think I did a pretty good job of hiding all of that for many, many years. And when I got older and understood the magnitude of it, I wanted to be sure that you could carry the weight of it because yes, it's my part of my testimony,
Mm-hmm.
but you are the miracle, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's heavy. And I never wanted to put it upon you um, if you weren't ready. I remember, and you probably remember this too, but like when we put you in Bethel, we had, we, yeah, we
Yeah.
had moved up here. And mind you, by this time I've changed my life around. Still no God, but like I'm living a good life and
Mm-hmm.
right by the kids as best as I could, with the tools I had. But uh, you, I got you back fairly quickly when you were a baby. All the things. So all of that happened, and we're fast forwarding to third grade. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how old are you, third grade?
Oh, couldn't even tell you.
And there were
Had to have
no
been like 9.
like God was so good that there were no side effects.
Yeah.
There were none. You had trouble sucking
Mm-hmm.
when you were born. Um, I got Mari in my head right now. But beyond that, your
No,
developmental
like cognitive.
nothing. There was
Yeah.
nothing. And we just Uncle Dave showered you with love, Granny and
Mm-hmm.
Peepaw.
I think that was the biggest one is just like hearing it from Uncle Dave's perspective, a doctor's perspective, but also
Mhm.
somebody who was there with me at that time
Yeah,
and getting to hear his perspective of like,
you were perfect.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, you were perfect. And that in and of itself, like him saying yes, like God was in it from the beginning. The day I went to jail, when Rodney, I shouldn't have said his name, when he shot up the house I was at, that day my grandpa died. And my uncle came to town for that. And I remember him and my cousin coming to see me. And we're there. And at this time, uh, the bio dad is still at large. There's agents following my mom. You were with my granny and peepaw, and then they were worried. So you went to my sister, and the family all came together, and my uncle came to see me. And he's like, "Look, we've fallen in love with this baby, and we want to take her to Louisiana." I'm like, "You're not taking my kid. You
Yeah.
are not taking my kid." It was possession. It wasn't. It was possession,
Yeah.
and thank God he didn't listen to me. And so my parents, first time they ever said no to me, and I sat in jail, which was the best thing they ever could have done for me. And they called a lawyer that I'd already known because I had been in trouble already. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then I went through treatment here. And then he said, "Well, too bad you're going through it again. You're coming out here." And we reunited, and we've never been apart since, ever since. So fast forward, I've gotten remarried. You've been adopted. We're muddling through it. Third grade, I put you in private school because I didn't want to put you in some trailer down the road in the dirt. And I thought it was going to be like the best thing. And it wasn't. And you had an awful teacher. And they were telling me there was like something wrong with you cognitively. And I remember going to the most amazing doctor in Corona. And I was terrified that it's showing up now. All my bad choices are showing up now. And I pulled her aside and I was in tears and I'm like, I used throughout my
Yeah.
whole pregnancy. Like, this is my fault. And she said, Mama, there is nothing wrong with your girl.
Yeah.
Nothing. Um, and we did the testing, and there was, thank God, there was nothing wrong with you. They're just a really awful teacher. And then, we go through life and life falls apart. And I needed to pull myself together so that you would see that I was going to be okay when you went away to college. And which is really where you met Jesus. I had started to encounter Jesus, and then when I heard from God, I just wanted to do everything I could to be close to God. Um, and then it's still just navigating, hearing, as you become a teacher, hearing you deal with parents who have addicted children, knowing that this is your calling and your purpose, because you have a story to tell, you have a testimony. Um, but finding the time when God, like, and I would pray, God, give me a window. When do you want me to tell her? When is she going to be ready to handle the weight of this? Because I will be giving her testimony. And it was on that patio, with doing an intervention with your uncle. And I remember the Holy Spirit saying, it's time. And I was like, no, no, not time. Not going to do that.
Not
Don't,
today.
not today. And I remember turning to you and said, tell me that you love me. Tell me that you know that I love you. And you're like, yeah,
Weirdo.
yeah, weirdo. And I spoke some truth to your uncle. And then I said, asked you again. And then I told you the hard truth. Like, there was a time when I didn't care. I had no, I didn't care about anything,
Mhm.
anything. Um, and, uh, and then now, here we are. Like, we're gonna talk about it and we're gonna dive in to that. So there's the background.
Mhm.
Um,
But this is what, like 5 years later.
it is 5 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
So
think we
they're
really ever talked about it after that.
like
We
here and there, but not like in depth.
Not in depth. Like, we talk about, like, if you tell me about the parents that would say, "Oh, he is acting this way because,"
Mm-hmm.
we talk about those things, right? But there's no other person that I could dream of having as my first interviewer, than you. It's just been an honor to watch you grow and step into who God calls you to be. It's been profound, to have such a miracle be done, like, through me, you know? So let's dive into some questions. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. Can you
Number
share?
one, what is your name?
Yeah, who are you? Tell us a little bit about you. Do it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Corey.
You are?
Um, I'm a mom of two beautiful boys. I've been married for 6 years. Um, to my high school sweetheart.
Mhm.
So we've been together for 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a teacher and I teach first grade.
Pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share your earliest memories of understanding God's love for you?
Um, I think it would just have to be when I dedicated my life because I didn't really know the fullness of him.
Mhm.
Um, because growing up, it was always just when things went bad or somebody had passed away, okay, God, like, where are you?
Mhm.
Help me. Why did you take them? Um, but never to see the fullness of God. I don't
Mhm.
think I really knew or understood him until I went to college. And by that time, you had already gone back to church. So I was kind of going back when I would come home or just little things here and there. But there was an event on campus and they had invited me to the event. They didn't go to our school. They were putting on a show and they were going out just kind of um meeting with people. They're like, "Oh, you want to get lunch?" And then they invited me to the show and then I go to the show and towards the end of it, I just remember feeling because I had shared with them a little bit of how I grew up and at the end of it, I just remember feeling so like broken and heavy and
Mm.
not knowing what was missing. And then I remember one of the girls, she had asked me and she's like, "Did you want to give your life to Christ today?"
Wow.
And she kind of gave me the walkthrough and told me what it looked like. And they also had gone through some of the questions that they were asking people throughout the day. And she just said that we weren't meant to live life alone and how God shows up for us and that He's there for us always. And she prayed for me. And I just know, like, throughout the years, just kind of seeing how He's shown up in the midst of everything and looking back on all of it. Um, I think just in college, that's kind of where my journey kind of began.
What was it was like a college missionaries, weren't they?
Yeah,
That's
they
pretty
were
amazing.
from Arizona.
That's really amazing. And that
Hmm.
happens. They just go around to college campuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching that happen, and it was answered prayer, you know,
Hmm.
but it was beautiful to watch, and I knew that your journey had to be yours, and mine had to be mine.
Yeah.
Um, and it was, yeah, beautiful to watch.
Yeah. And I think that's what's been the best part of like, we were always kind of just seasonal and went through the holidays or stuff like that, or we'd go with grandma. But I think the biggest part that's kind of helped me is it's never was pushed on. It
Mhm.
was okay, it's your decision. You choose for yourself. If you want to go, you can go. But it was never like, oh, you have to. This is what you need to do.
Yeah,
Um, even
until it wasn't. Your other two.
yeah.
And as a parent, I don't have many regrets. There's things I wish I would do differently, but that's not as heavy as a regret. I wish I had a faith with you guys. But there was this that literally, I mean, Grandma found a letter not too long ago that your dad and I left with them. Like, you're not to talk to them about God. And we really believed it had to be your decision.
Yeah.
But I just wish I would have had a foundation of my own
Hmm.
to stand firm on because that changes things within a household. So I was just so thankful it was answered a prayer. It was.
Yeah.
So moving on to question two. How do you feel our shared faith has shaped our relationship as mother and daughter?
Mm, I think it's just allowed me to know, like, it's always been a safe space, but knowing that we have that shared faith, and that you're always going to kind of point me back to and remind me of his truths in the midst of the crazy,
Hmm.
um, especially like with my marriage or um, just, I think the biggest thing is like when life gets crazy, just being able to find the little things along the way, because I don't think if I didn't have that, then I don't think we would have the deep connection that we do have.
Sure, I would agree with that.
I think it just kind of creates that foundation for us.
Yeah. And it helps when I'm having faith and trust in God that God's got you.
Yeah.
You know, I've got other friends who've got adult kids who are married uh, and it's difficult to have adult children in general. I think it's much harder than any age at all. At all, it's just harder. But I think it's just a beautiful thing that you guys, Mara included, have allowed me to guide you when necessary,
Hmm.
but that you know that I'm here. Like
Yeah.
I trust God that God's got
Yeah.
this, and He continues to show up.
Hmm.
And even when things aren't crazy, He
Yeah.
continues to show up, and I trust Him in that. And I think because we have that shared faith, it really shapes our relationship.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be all up in your business. I know that if you need me, you'll
Yeah.
come to me. So
Hmm.
it's a trust thing. So as I trust God, I know that you trust me. So when you think about my decision to keep you, how does it impact your understanding of God's plan for your life?
Oof.
Ah, right.
Um, when I first found out, I didn't understand the fullness.
Sure.
Um, and then like with work and working with children, and as like the years went on, I like coming in contact with children who were also born addicted and seeing the cognitive effects that they had, but they didn't have the home support,
Mhm.
or parents didn't really know how to kind of navigate that, or they were in the system. Um, just that, like I navigated that well, but I don't think it fully hit me until I became a mom.
Wow.
So I was navigating that with work and realizing, yes, I'm here for a reason. And yes, I was one of the lucky ones. And I think that's when I had I met up with Uncle Dave, and we had talked. So I met up with Uncle, and we were just talking about how I came out and then how I grew up, and I didn't have any of the side effects that typical kids do.
Hmm.
Um, so that was just more so closure, in a sense of, okay, well, why am I here? So just being able to navigate that and kind of support kids and just kind of become more educated myself, um, I think has helped. But then I don't think it really hit until I had my first. And then just the fullness of, I never really had bitterness towards you. I never really had anger.
Hmm.
But when I had my first, it was just a weight of, um, how could you?
Hmm.
But not in a sense of like bitterness or upset. Like I was pregnant and then I had,
Like not an understanding.
yeah,
How
I
could
didn't,
you?
yeah,
Yeah, because even in your pregnancy, like you were worried about like taking an aspirin. And we would
yeah.
always make love,
Could
we
be
make
worse.
could be worse, could be worse.
Yeah.
Sure, I get
So
that.
that fullness of like, I, how could you? And then just thinking it in the sense of, it could have basically have just been an abortion, but it wasn't, it didn't work out. You know what I mean? So just thinking of that fullness of how I could never, but also just having to realize like, one, being grateful, like I'm here and that I'm able to have children of my own,
Mhm.
um, and that fullness. But it was definitely a lot to kind of work through. Um, just the fullness of my life and his life, because neither of them should be, and we are.
Right, right. I think I had a full circle moment when we took Malachi to church for the
Hmm.
family dedication. And I was just praising God, and I looked down and looked at you, and Malachi was sitting on my chest, and like if it wasn't for God's provision, you wouldn't have been here because of my decisions, right? And then there wouldn't have been any Mavi, and there wouldn't have been any Malachi. And that's all God.
Yeah.
If it were up to me in that season of my life, I was doing everything I could possibly to not have you, except have an abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a crazy moment in church that day.
Hmm.
He's been so, so good. You know, he
Yeah.
has.
So,
What does forgiveness mean to you, and how has it played a role in our story?
mm, I think it just depends. The forgiveness is different in different relationships. So I
You think
think,
so?
yeah, in the essence of like, for us, I was able to forgive because that was the past you and your past self. And like, I wasn't really, it's nothing I remembered or nothing I
Sure.
was a part of, you know what I mean? So I think it
Hmm.
was just more so, yes, I forgave you and I'm grateful, but I'm still able to love you and have
Hmm.
that relationship with you. But then there's other people who you kind of like forgive and then you have to kind of love from a distance or kind of set those boundaries. So I think
So
forgiveness,
is it like, because I think about forgiveness, forgiveness is forgiveness, but not everybody I'm going to reconcile with,
right?
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I
but
had to learn that. I remember, and it almost made me leave sandals at the time. It
yeah,
was like on fire for Christ, like on fire. And I was having a real hard, I knew I needed to ask for some forgiveness from people, but I did not want to reconcile at all.
yeah,
I didn't want those people in my life, but I still needed to ask for forgiveness. And I had asked a leader the difference from between restoration and reconciliation.
mm,
And restoration comes with forgiveness. Like the relationship is me and God
yeah,
is restored, right? But I don't want any reconciling with that person. And they turned. I've since learned as I'm a leader now, probably wasn't directed to me. She didn't even know who I was at the time, but she turned around and like looked at me like I should have known the question,
yeah,
the answer to the question. And I thought to myself, oh girl, you're lucky God's got his hand on me because, like
yeah,
F you and this church,
yeah,
but I had to learn that. So
hmm,
it's different, to have restoration because forgiveness restores us with God
yeah,
and reconciliation restores us with the person. And
yeah,
sometimes we don't want to reconcile because they're not safe,
yeah,
you know. And we have to navigate that in our own life now.
hmm,
Yeah, I think you've been generous with your forgiveness, and that's beautiful. But I think that's also because you know Jesus.
yeah. And I think that's what's kind of helped me with that forgiveness with us and just kind of be able to let it go and realize it's not mine.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
mine to carry, it's not mine to pick up. Yes, it's part of my story, but ultimately, like, I'm super grateful to be on the other end of it and
Hmm.
just to see the blessing that you are and
Hmm.
the changes that you've made and that you've been able to turn your life around,
Hmm.
which in turn, like, you've been able to create a life for us,
Hmm.
um, which wouldn't have been possible if you didn't find your own way.
This is true. This is true. How do you feel God has used our testimony to impact others around us? I think this podcast is going to do that because we really haven't. There have been some times like throughout my season as a Christian where I have been able to give hope to some mothers,
Hmm.
adopted mothers, right? Like got a baby from foster and they were
Yeah.
worried and to give hope to them. But
Hmm.
I've always everything has been very close to the vest because one, fear.
Yeah.
Right. And Fredo said today he's going to use God will use your insecurity
Hmm.
to impact people. And part of doing this podcast is me getting over myself and my fear.
Hmm.
And so I think, at least for me, there have been moments where I have shared with people and those sorts of things about uh, using during my pregnancy and how you came into the world. But I share more, I think, about the divorce journey and the betrayal journey and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps impact people because it's really night and day who I was, before Christ and who I am after Christ.
Yeah.
And it is night and day. It really is. And don't get me wrong, I'm still in here and I still come out from
Yeah.
time to time, but
Nothing compared to.
nothing compared to. No. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
How do you feel, your testimony has impacted people around you?
Mm, I don't know. Like I don't think I've been able to utilize that part yet because it's like I work with kids and I haven't really had an opportunity because of the profession I'm in. I can't just be like, hey, here's my story, you
Well,
know?
how do you feel about doing this?
Um, this is my extracurricular, so it's not as if I'm,
It's not a big deal.
no.
That's pretty. Yeah, so I think it's the podcast. We'll see what it does, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What is one way you see God's hand in the timing and circumstances of your life?
Mm. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What is one way you see God's hand in the timing and circumstances of your life?
It's all in his timing.
It is. It is in
Yeah.
his timing. Yeah. I think one way specifically that I've seen God's hand in the timing and circumstances in my life is just and he keeps whispering this to me because there have been some trials in my
Yeah.
life, some of my own doing, some not. Is And I don't know that any of them have had, like, I'm sure they're divine timing, right? But he continues to whisper, "I will never leave you or forsake you." So it
Mm.
doesn't matter what the timing or the circumstances are. His hand is always there.
Yeah.
Always. I mean, I can when I think about like timing and circumstances and God's hand, from the from the day the bullets went by,
Yeah.
right, to you, to me being told no and going to jail, to you, sadly, my grandfather dying that the same day, like that's all God's
Mhm.
timing and circumstances,
Yeah.
all of it to this very day, all of it.
Hmm.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important lesson our journey together has taught you about God's grace?
Mm, that no matter like what you've done or I've done, that we're still chosen and that we have a purpose.
Mm, that's good.
That what we do doesn't impact of like who he says we are.
Right.
That we're enough because he says we're enough, not because of all the things that we do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm.
How do you view your role in sharing our story of redemption and hope with others? Do you view it as like it's going to be impactful?
Oh, for sure. Because I think there's not, like, I don't know anybody who has a story like we do, you know? So I think
I
it's
don't think
good.
people talk about it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, it's not, it's like voodoo. Like, it's like the elephant in the room. Like, how do you talk
Mhm.
about it? How do you
Yeah.
talk about something that shouldn't have been done?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of creating that safe space for people to realize that they're not alone
Sure.
and that there is hope.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest piece.
Yeah, and quieting the the chatterbox of the intrusive thoughts that
Yeah.
can keep us from all that God has from us, right?
Hmm.
I think when we speak this stuff, it and speak God's truth,
Yeah.
it quiets the noise.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people probably don't because the world is telling them and giving them the shame.
Hmm.
So then comes the shame, and then the fear is like, okay, well, I'm just not going to talk about it
Right.
because it's
Right.
easier.
Right. And there are going to be people because God is in certain situations asked me to step out in faith and share, and you will see people shift. I remember I went to support a friend was having a community group, so I just went to support. And one of the questions like went straight to, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, mm-mm,
I'm good.
I'm not gonna do it. And God, the spirit just kept. So I had to like step into that, and you will see people shift,
Mhm.
right? There will be judgment.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Even though this was 30 years ago,
Yeah.
and I had to start to be okay with that because that's something they need to work out with God. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have anything to do with me.
Right.
But yeah. So that might I don't know that you've experienced that yet, but and and it won't be, well, you know what? I'll take it back. You have experienced it in the sense of we've had people in our life who have thrown judgment and shame your way because of me.
Mm-hmm.
So
I forgot
this
about
will
that.
this will be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom did that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of give you um, a view
Yeah,
that
but it's so quick for people to pass judgment without actually knowing you or me or the full
sure.
situation. But even when they do know the full situation,
Mhm.
um, they can still pass judgment.
Oh, for
And
sure.
then
And
that's
then they
just,
lose sight of the hope and the redemption
hmm, yeah.
because there's both.
Hmm.
There is both. Yeah. What is one prayer you have for our relationship as we continue to grow in faith together?
Mm, I don't know. I think it's just kind of for God to move through us and that He's able to use our story to
Mm.
bring light and to reach others.
Yeah, that's a pretty good prayer. That's a really good prayer.
Mm.
What does it mean to you to know that God had a purpose for your life before you were born?
Mm. So growing up, whenever you would tell me that, and then you would buy me stuff that said that, and you would just remind me, "Oh no, God's got a purpose for you," before I even knew anything. So you
I
were
did all the
planting,
time.
hmm, you
Hmm.
were planting seeds all the years. And I feel like even before you found your faith again, you would just plant seeds. There's a purpose. You have a purpose.
I knew that.
I did.
Even though I didn't know God, I knew that. You know?
Hmm.
I was just talking with a friend today. I think it was yesterday, like talking about the gift of knowing,
Yeah.
right? It's you know that you know that you know, but you don't have any idea why
What you
you
know?
know, but you know.
Yeah.
And that's a gift. And I
Hmm.
had no idea that it was a gift of mine then,
Hmm.
but I knew. Yeah, there was and I even argue with, some people when they want to argue about it, but there is no explanation for you but for God. Period.
Hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
Nobody can even our uncle, my uncle, your great uncle, will say that walking through that, saying yes to us and watching our journey has made him believe in something bigger, you know?
That says a lot.
That says a lot. It
Mm.
does. Yeah. So how do you feel? That was all 10.
All 10.
It was.
Yeah. I feel good. I think it just going back to like you were sprinkling all those things, and I didn't know the fullness of it until I knew. And
Hmm.
then after I knew and processed it out, and I got out of, like, stepped away from, so I can kind of look on it from the outside
Hmm.
of how you've been essentially preparing me and making sure that I was ready to receive.
Hmm.
Um, and just that reminder and just the impact of knowing like I was wonderfully made
Hmm. Yeah.
before I was made.
Yeah, he knit you in my womb when I
Hmm.
was throwing all kinds of other stuff in my womb,
Hmm.
you know?
And I came out and wasn't affected.
Mm-mm. No,
Yeah,
mind blowing, really. But that is God.
that is God.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you. And I kind of remember the catchphrase for the podcast. It usually goes something like this.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, da, da, da. Thank you for tuning into Jenni Jenni, Who Can I Run To? As she and all those she walks with runs to the one we all turn to, which is God.
Amen.
Amen.
Tune in
You
next time. Please
tune
subscribe.
in next time. Well, we were pretty tame,
Yeah, I know.
right? I almost lost it with the Mari thing, but I pulled it back.
Hold it back.
I did.
Don't feed into it because it's just gonna go downhill.
Hmm.
Don't
I
laugh
love
at.
you. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.